The objective of today's PowerPoint presentation is an introduction to the basic principles that define sociology. The presentation has two parts, so be sure to view both. Topics addressed today will include defining sociology, exploring the development of sociology, addressing what constitutes a sociological theory, and finally, introducing you to the basic concepts that define three major theoretical perspectives that are commonly used by sociologists in an effort to understand and explain human behavior. Sociology is defined as the systematic study of social behavior in human groups. Through systematic means, sociology has the capability to provide objective and reliable information used to explain how social relationships have significant influences on the development and stability of human attitudes and behaviors. Relationships such as families, parents being the more prominent teacher or guidance of social norms and expectations, followed by peers and even media and religion, all of which have an effect of how we see ourselves and others. Another venue sociologists use to examine human behavior is through the development or changes in a society. Sociologists oftentimes will look at the interrelationship displayed between individuals and groups. This allows them insight into the roles that develop from the interactions, many of which possess the potential of either igniting or subsiding a possible societal change. C. Wright Mills relied, just as most sociologists do, on critical thinking as a means of providing a more objective explanation and understanding of human behavior. Critical thinking can be explained as simply as looking beyond the obvious. By using critical thinking, sociologists can discover general patterns in the behaviors of a particular people. Critical thinking pushes us to look for the unfamiliar in the familiar, to locate behavioral patterns that may go unnoticed due to assumptions that are set by accepting only the obvious. C. Wright Mills used the principles of critical thinking when developing his concept of sociological imagination, which is defined as an awareness of the relationship between an individual and their environment, both in the present and in the past, as a means to see an even more clear view of human behavior. By utilizing social imagination, we all have the ability to recognize and understand the connections of the many influences that cross our social developmental paths. These influences are vast and include countless exposures from our immediate personal settings to the more impersonal world, with goals used to guide and shape our social self. The key element toward the successful use of sociological imagination is the ability to view one's own society as an outsider would, allowing us to pull away from influences that can dim our views of a complete picture. Things such as personal experiences and cultural biases are barriers that do not allow a more objective view. The more we push our personal views aside, the wider our view becomes when observing a behavior or situation. We have made an opportunity to see a much larger amount of variables connected to what we are studying or observing. Sociological imagination gives us the ability to see the same picture through many perspectives. So, how did sociology develop into a science? Comparatively, sociology would be considered one of the youngest declared sciences. Just as with any other science, though, sociology involves the organized, systematic study of phenomena, in this case, human behavior, in order to further enhance understanding. In other words, information that is revealed as a sociological explanation is gathered, measured, and presented in a systematic, reliable, and verifiable means. The outcome is to be as objective as possible. There are two branches of sciences, natural and social. Natural studies the physical features of nature and ways that they interact and change, which include astronomy, biology, chemistry, geology, and physics. Sociology is a social science which studies the social features of humans and the way we interact and change. Other social sciences include anthropology, economics, psychology, history, and political science. Even though all of these disciplines have a common focus on the social behavior of people, they all have their own specific orientation. So, exactly how did sociology develop? Human behavior was first observed by philosophers and religious authorities. It should be noted they were merely observations. They were not tested or verifiable in the scientific sense. This, however, did not mean that these observations didn't have significant influences on the development of societies and their members. During the 19th century, European theorists began building sociology into a science. There were many that made this vision into a reality. Auguste Comte coined the word sociology. He believed that a theoretical science of society and a systematic investigation of behavior were needed to improve society. Harriet Martineau focused on social class distinctions, which included gender and race. She also wrote the first book on sociological methods. Herbert Spencer, unlike Martineau, did not feel compelled to correct or improve society. Instead, he focused on the need to understand human behavior more effectively. He felt that social change was inevitable, a natural course for a society to remain dynamic. Emile Durkheim was one of the first sociology professors in France. He believes that human behavior must be understood within a larger social context, not just in individualistic terms. He coined the term anomie, which typically happens during a significant social change. Society's members have lost their sense of purpose. Confusion peaks, and members are unable to cope with the newly defined social development. The Great Depression of the 1930s or Hurricane Katrina were both examples of this. Max Weber, a German sociologist and professor, taught his students to employ Verstehen, which is German for understanding or insight. To fully understand behavior, we must recognize and learn the subjective meanings people attach to their actions, how they themselves view and explain their behavior. Weber also introduced us to the term ideal type, which is a model or standard in which we use for evaluating specific cases. Karl Marx looked at society as being fundamentally divided between two classes, which collided in search of their own interests. He focused on industrial societies and saw factories as the center of conflict, which consisted of the exploiters, or the owners, and the exploited, or the workers. An outcome of Marxism brought encouragement to sociologists to look at segments of society that rarely influence decision making. W.E.B. Du Bois studied and conducted research which was deemed hopeful in assisting with the struggle for a racially egalitarian society. His motivation of studying human behavior focused on knowledge as a critical role toward rectifying prejudice and achieving tolerance and justice. The 20th century brought an opportunity to broaden the understanding toward human behavior through theories and research. Charles Horton Cooley, an American sociologist and professor, looked at human behavior that was similar to Durkheim, Weber, and Marx. He studied human behavior through the interactions between the more intimate or smaller groups. He saw these smaller groups as the basic units of society in respect to people's ideals, beliefs, values, and social nature. Jane Addams saw herself as a social reformer, as did many of her co-sociologists. Addams' purpose as a sociologist was to systematically study societal corruption in order to improve or ultimately to eliminate which caused the corruption. To many, Jane Addams was considered one of the pioneers in the social work field. By the mid-20th century, the focus moved from reform to theorizing and gathering information in an effort to explain human behavior. They became the gatherers of information. During this transformation, sociology became more committed to scientific methods of research and to value-free interpretation of data. Robert Merton was one of the first sociologists to exhibit this transformation from reform to research. His theory on deviant behavior is one of the most frequently cited explanations. Merton also stressed that sociology should focus on macro and micro level approaches in order to study society, with macro sociology directed on a large-scale phenomena or entire civilization, and micro sociology studying small groups, often through experimental means. Pierre Bourdieu looked at the influence capital and its many forms that sustain individuals and families from one generation to the next. In this sense, capital went beyond monetary value, with cultural and social assets being significant as well. Cultural capital referred to family background and education, reflecting knowledge base of language and the arts, which are valued by the social elite. Social capital refers to the collective benefit of social networks, which are built on reciprocal trust. Networks are significant when looking at the opportunity to advance.